Death Valley is not to be taken lightly. Stretching along California's eastern border, this national park is a sun-scorched depression surrounded by sharp mountain ranges. It is home to the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere, Badwater Basin, 280 feet below sea level, and is also home to the highest temperature on Earth, 134.6 degrees Celsius. The Death Valley landscape is a mosaic of lifeless salt flats, scatterings of sharp rocks, and rare oases where deep groundwater bursts to the surface, creating tiny islands of life in a sea of unrelenting heat. Despite all the dangers, about 1 million tourists come here every year to see the beauty of the golden sands of the dunes and the colorful rocks of the canyons. Every year, dozens of tourists get into trouble in this rugged region. Park rangers tirelessly warn of the need for thorough preparation. A full tank of fuel, a water supply, at least 4 liters per person per day, paper maps, and off-road vehicles for remote areas. Safety in Death Valley is not just a recommendation, but a matter of survival. Cell phone service is virtually non-existent in the vast expanse of the park. Outside of tourist centers such as Furness Creek, one finds oneself completely cut off from the outside world. Each year, park officials record numerous incidents requiring search and rescue operations. And the July 2010 incident reminds us once again why this place has its ominous name. Donna Cooper has never turned down an opportunity to travel. At 62 years old, this resident of the small town of Pahrump, Nevada, still has the youthful enthusiasm of a pioneer and an unquenchable thirst for new experiences. Despite all the trials that have befallen her, a serious car accident in her youth, raising 8 children, and a serious illness in Haiti in early 2010. Each crisis Donna has overcome with remarkable calm and determination. "I believe traveling makes us richer," she often said as she planned her next trip. In recent years, Donna crossed much of the American West, showing its beauty to her traveling companions. Next to Donna, on this July morning in 2010, were 2 young girls. Her 17-year-old daughter, Gina, was energetic, with a lively mind and a love of adventure inherited from her mother. There was a special bond between them based on mutual trust. The third participant was Jenny Lun, a 19-year-old student from Hong Kong. Arriving in America in May, she moved into the Cooper home on a cultural exchange program and quickly became almost a member of the family. Their transportation was a modest Hyundai Accent, a compact silver sedan. The car was ideal for city streets and paved highways, but was not designed for the rigors of off-roading. However, Donna, like most Nevadans, was used to driving considerable distances, and the car rarely let her down. Their packing was short that morning. Donna had put a few blankets and a basic toolkit in the trunk, a habit developed from years of traveling through the western states. The cabin held a few bottles of water, a bag of chips, a couple of apples and cookies, enough for a day trip, but woefully inadequate for what lay ahead. The fuel tank was only a quarter full, which under normal circumstances would be enough for about 100–120 miles. Driving out of Pahrump, Donna informed her friend Charlene that they were going to visit Scotty's castle in Death Valley. She had driven past it many times, but had never stopped to visit. Now, with 2 inquisitive companions, the moment seemed perfect. Neither of them could have guessed that a simple tourist trip would turn into an incredible struggle for survival in one of the most ruthless places on the planet. A challenge that would test not only their physical strength, but also their character, resourcefulness, and will to live. Thursday began with clear skies and anticipation of new discoveries. The sun was just rising above the horizon when the silver Hyundai Accent pulled out of Pahrump, a small town just an hour's drive from Death Valley. Donna Cooper, hands on the steering wheel, was enjoying the morning chill, realizing that by afternoon the temperature would soar to its usual July extremes. Gina and Jenny chatted softly in the back seat, discussing their upcoming visit to Scotty's castle, a mysterious landmark lost among the desert landscape. Donna occasionally glanced at them in the rearview mirror, pleased with their enthusiasm. Scotty's castle, officially known as Death Valley Ranch, was a two-story Spanish colonial-style villa built between 1922 and 1931. Its history was filled with myth and intrigue. Chicago millionaire Albert Johnson erected the mansion for his ailing wife, hoping that the dry climate of Death Valley would help her health. However, he was made famous by the adventurer Walter Scott, nicknamed Scotty, who claimed to have built the castle with the proceeds of a fictitious gold mine. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they arrived at the castle gates. The contrast between the stark desert and the Spanish mansion with its pool, fountains, and lush gardens was almost surreal. Donna bought 3 tickets, the last transaction that would later help her relatives begin their search. For 2 hours, the women wandered the cool corridors, admiring the antique furniture and unusual interior. The castle kept pleasantly cool despite the temperature outside, thanks to the thick walls. The guide told stories about Scotty and his fantastic tales that attracted curious visitors to this remote location. Leaving the castle around 3 in the afternoon, they were greeted by a heat wave. The temperature exceeded 134.6 degrees Celsius, the air shivering over the red-hot asphalt. It was then that Donna noticed a sign for Racetrack Playa, a flat, dried-up lake known for the mysterious phenomenon of moving rocks. Over the years, rocks have left long trails, as if someone was pushing them across the bottom of the dried lake. The phenomenon, which had no scientific explanation until 2014, intrigued scientists and tourists alike. "I've always wanted to see this," Donna said, looking at a map of the park. Gina and Jenny enthusiastically supported the idea. Why not see another unique attraction? Donna pulled out her navigator and typed in Racetrack Playa. The device, programmed to find the shortest route, calculated the path and gave directions. According to the park's official recommendations, Racetrack Playa was 27 miles from the nearest paved road and could only be reached by a high-clearance vehicle. The women drove out of the parking lot of Scotty's castle, unaware of how their spontaneous decision would turn out. The Hyundai Accent, reliable on city streets, was completely unprepared for the rigors that awaited it on the abandoned trails of Death Valley. They traveled west on Highway 267. Soon the asphalt changed to gravel, and they reached Tea Kettle Junction, a notable intersection named for an unusual tradition. Hanging from a signpost were dozens of tea kettles left behind by travelers. Some were covered with signatures and dates, while others were decorated with drawings and messages. This place marked the boundary between relatively passable roads and true tracklessness. Gina, who had replaced her mother at the wheel, stopped the car. Donna checked the GPS. The signs gave conflicting information. One directed to Racetrack Playa. The other warned of a difficult road not recommended for regular cars. Gina turned left, following the GPS directions. Their Hyundai began to make slow progress on the bumpy road, which became increasingly narrow and uneven. The car's low ground clearance forced them to move at a snail's pace. 10 miles later, Racetrack Playa never appeared. Instead, the road began to climb up into the mountains. What was once a dirt road had become an abandoned trail. "Let's ask for directions back to Scotty's castle," Gina suggested, mentioning the GPS navigator. She pressed a few buttons, canceling the current route and requesting a new one. But it was here, in the deep canyons of Death Valley, that technology failed them. The satellite signal was weak and intermittent, forcing the GPS to constantly recalculate the route. The sun was slowly sloping toward the horizon, casting long shadows on the rocky ground. The temperature remained above 113 degrees Fahrenheit, but even more alarming was the fuel tank arrow. It was inexorably approaching the red zone after more than 100 miles of off-road driving, where fuel consumption was much higher than normal. Cell phones showed not a single streak of signal. They found themselves completely cut off from the world, wandering through a maze of mountain trails taking them further and further away from civilization. The odometer read more than 180 miles since leaving Scotty's castle, and with each new mile they were running out of fuel. Their situation was becoming more and more critical. When the sun was almost hidden behind the ridge, Donna took over again. The car traveled another few hundred yards and stopped. The engine died, plunging them into the silence of the desert. There were no lights around, no sign of human presence, just the majestic silent canyons and the darkening sky. "Looks like we'll have to spend the night here," Donna said calmly, though inwardly she was well aware of the danger of their situation. The three women were trapped in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth, with minimal water, no communication, and no fuel. The first rays of Friday's sun mercilessly exposed the reality of their situation. The odometer showed just over 200 miles since leaving Scotty's castle. They had gotten deep into the wilderness of Death Valley. "We must act," Donna said, assessing the situation with a calmness developed from years of overcoming hardship. They took inventory of their meager supplies: the last bottle of water, 2 apples, leftover chips, and a few cookies. Gina was the first to get out of the car and cringed at the scalding air. The temperature was already climbing toward 113 degrees Celsius, and it was only morning. She began picking up rocks. Slowly, stone by stone, large letters appeared on an open patch of ground. "Help." The letters were large enough, about 13 feet long, to be seen from the air. Meanwhile, Donna and Jenny busied themselves with finding water. Being extremely thirsty, they tried to extract moisture from cacti and pine needles, but the results were minimal. Just a little bitter liquid, not enough to quench their thirst. They shared the last bottle of water equally, in tiny gulps, realizing they had to stretch their supplies as long as possible. Toward noon, the heat became unbearable. The air seemed to melt over the rocks, their skin burning even in the shade of the car. Jenny, faced with such extreme conditions for the first time, felt her fear and anxiety growing by the hour. As a foreigner, far from home, she had relied entirely on Donna's experience. Airplanes occasionally flew over them, small dots in the vast sky. The women tried every available method of signaling. Gina used the CD as a mirror, reflecting the sunlight. Jenny waved a bright yellow emergency blanket, but the planes continued on their way, oblivious to their desperate attempts to get attention. By Friday evening, Gina decided to explore the neighborhood. She hiked about 2 miles up the rocky trail, hoping to find help, or at least a better view of the terrain to determine their position. As she climbed to a small elevation, all she saw was vast desert. No sign of civilization, just rocks and sparse vegetation as far as the eye could see. Meanwhile, in faraway Florida, Donna's daughter, Sky Cooper, was recovering from gallbladder surgery. She tried to call her mother several times, but all calls went to voicemail. It didn't cause alarm at first. Donna often went on spontaneous trips, but when 24 hours passed without word, Sky began to worry. She checked her mother's credit card accounts and found the last transaction: 3 tickets to Scotty's castle, dated Thursday, 1 p.m. Nothing after that. In Pahrump, Charlene Dean, who had been keeping an eye on Donna's house, was also starting to worry. After contacting Sky, they decided to take action and contacted authorities. But neither the Nye and Inyo County sheriffs nor the Death Valley Rangers could begin a full-fledged search immediately. Too little information, too vast an area. On Saturday morning, something that could only be called a miracle happened at Donna's car. When they had already lost all hope that the car would start, Donna decided to try again, just to be safe. She turned the key, and to everyone's amazement, the engine came to life. Perhaps the small amount of fuel had redistributed in the tank overnight, or the battery had regained a minimal charge. The reason was unimportant. What mattered was that they had a chance. The resurrected car had become their lifeline. Donna instantly went from relief to action, realizing that every second the engine was running was precious. "Get in quickly," she commanded, and a moment later all 3 were inside. Donna drove the car in the most fuel-efficient mode possible, going in neutral on the downhills and picking up speed rapidly on the flat stretches before the uphills. If the car stalled now, there might not be a second miracle. At the bottom, the terrain leveled out, and a small salt flat opened up before them, glistening in the midday sun. In the distance, they noticed something unexpected: a wire fence, a locked gate, and some live trees. "Look! There might be people there!" Gina exclaimed, pointing to the trailer standing behind the trees. The car was slowly approaching the fence when the engine stalled again. The last drops of fuel had run out, but it didn't matter anymore. They had found a sign of civilization. The three women struggled to climb out of the red-hot car. The heat was unbearable, the temperature exceeding 122 degrees Fahrenheit. The ground literally burned under their feet, even through the soles of their sneakers. Sweat evaporated instantly, and dehydration progressed by the minute. They walked around the wire fence and approached the gate. The abandoned camp consisted of 2 or 3 old trailers surrounding a wooden porch. The buildings looked abandoned, but in relatively good condition. Donna knocked on doors, calling out, but there was no answer. Going around the largest trailer, Donna found a treasure: a coiled garden hose connected to a water faucet. With trembling hands, she turned the vent. Seconds stretched into eternity as something rumbled in the pipes. Then the water came. Hot, metallic, but life-giving and real. The three women fell to their knees, greedily gulping water straight from the hose despite its scalding temperature. The first sips after nearly 2 days of thirst were like coming back to life. They filled every container they could find: empty bottles, soda cans, even plastic containers from the dumpster. No one knew if the water would flow tomorrow. Gina, showing resourcefulness, tried to break into the trailers. In one of them, Jenny was able to climb through a narrow window and found a few cans of canned beans and chili, a half-empty box of spaghetti, and oatmeal inside. Not much, but enough to keep her strength up for a few more days. It was unbearably hot inside the trailers. The sun heated the metal walls like an oven. They pulled the mattresses out onto the veranda, where at least there was shade. Donna opened the cans of food, and they ate for the first time in hours, silent and focused, as if performing a sacred ritual. By now, the mechanism for the rescue had already been set in motion. Charlene and Skye had contacted authorities in several counties. The California Highway Police activated a helicopter to search the remote areas of the park where Donna's credit card had last been used. Rangers provided maps of abandoned roads and coordinated ground searches. Ironically, it was cell phones, useless in the mountains due to lack of signal, that provided information on the women's approximate location, thanks to data on the last tower when they still had some connection. In the abandoned camp that became their refuge, the women kept trying to signal. They reinforced the help sign on the car, kept waving a yellow blanket at the sound of airplanes. The sun was preparing to set as Gina took an impromptu bath in the trailer, using the water from the hose to relieve the fatigue and grime of the last few days. Donna helped her wash her hair, just like when Gina was a little girl. This simple moment of maternal care in the midst of extreme disaster seemed almost surreal. By early Saturday, the third day of their ordeal, the heat seemed even more relentless. Temperatures soared past 122 degrees earlier than usual, as if the desert itself wanted to test the limits of human endurance. The abandoned campground was their temporary shelter, but conditions were far from comfortable. Mattresses dragged out on the veranda provided minimal protection from the blazing sun, but even in the shade the temperature exceeded 113 degrees Celsius. Every 15 minutes the women had to douse themselves with water from a hose. Donna continued to remain outwardly calm, but inwardly she was calculating her options. If help didn't arrive in the next 24 hours, they would have to take the desperate step of trying to walk to the main road. In this heat, that would be tantamount to suicide, but the alternative, starving to death in an abandoned camp, was no better. Gina became the physical leader of the group. Her youth and energy allowed her to actively continue her signaling attempts. She regularly went out into the open with a yellow emergency blanket, waving it at every sound of an airplane. On the hood of the car, in large letters of dust, was written, "Help, call police." She also tried lighting a signal fire, but the dry branches only burned, producing no discernible smoke. Jenny, the most vulnerable of the three, held on solely because of Donna's support. The culture shock of facing an extreme situation in a foreign country heightened her fear. Meanwhile, the search operation was gaining momentum. Charlene and Skye called every possible authority: the sheriffs of Nye and Inyo counties, California Highway Police, National Park Rangers. The story of the 3 missing women began to spread in localized news outlets in Nevada and California. The helicopter methodically scoured remote areas of the park, following routes that could lead from Scotty's castle to Racetrack Playa. Pilots Tyler Jones and Scott Steele, experienced in search and rescue operations, knew that with each passing hour, the chances of finding the women alive were diminishing. The Rangers, meanwhile, were interviewing other hikers, checking log books at park entrances, and analyzing data from surveillance cameras outside Scotty's castle. The puzzle was slowly coming together. 3 women in a silver Hyundai accent had probably headed for Racetrack Playa without sufficient preparation. The sun had already begun its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the 3 women's weary faces. It was the 3rd day of their ordeal in the merciless desert. The temperature was finally beginning to drop, bringing a small relief after the hellish heat of the day. Donna, Gina, and Jenny were gathered on the veranda again, sharing canned beans, perhaps their last meal before deciding to march on foot to civilization. Jenny sat on the veranda watching the sky, a habit they had developed over the days. Any movement in the air could mean rescue. Suddenly she heard it, a distant but distinct and growing sound. At first she thought it was an auditory hallucination, a mirage for her ears caused by overheating and hope. But the sound grew louder and more distinct. "Come out! Come out!" Jenny shouted, jumping to her feet and grabbing the yellow blanket. Donna ran out of the trailer, Gina hastily pulling on clothes. Jenny was already frantically waving the blanket around in the open where they could be spotted from the air. The sound was becoming deafening, throbbing in their hearts along with hope. And then they saw it. A blue and white helicopter with a California Highway Patrol emblem, circling over the abandoned campground. From the loudspeaker came the pilot's clear voice. "You're safe." 3 simple words that meant the end of the nightmare. Tears streamed down Gina's cheeks, mixing with dust and sweat. Jenny continued to wave the blanket around as if she couldn't believe they'd been spotted. Donna just stood there, her face expressing deep relief after days of unspoken tension. 2 emergency medical technicians emerged from the helicopter. They carried bottles of water, real cold water that the women hadn't seen in 3 days. One of the paramedics took Donna's wrist, checking her pulse. "We were just about to pronounce you dead and fly you back to base," he said. The words hit Donna like a fist. They were so close to going undiscovered, doomed to a slow death from thirst and heat. After an initial examination, medics offered 2 options. A helicopter could take them to Lone Pine, the nearest town, but one at a time, which meant a long wait for 2. Or they could wait for the ranger, who was already on his way with a canister of gasoline and clear instructions on how to get out to the highway. The women chose the second option. Now that they had been found, they preferred to stick together until the end. About an hour passed. Sunset colored the desert in golden tones as a ranger's jeep pulled up to the camp. A tall man in uniform stepped out of the vehicle carrying a 5-gallon canister of gasoline. To the women, this simple canister looked more valuable than gold. The ranger helped pour fuel into the Hyundai's tank, then unfolded a map on the hood of the car. "You're here," he indicated a point on the map. "You need to follow this road east about 15 miles. It will take you out to Highway 190. From there, it's another 20 miles to Furnace Creek. There's a medical center and stores there." The instructions were clear and simple. The women thanked their rescuers, gathered their few belongings, and got into the car. Donna turned the key and the engine started again. This time, they knew exactly the way home. The women drove in silence, still not fully realizing that their ordeal was coming to an end. From time to time, Donna checked the map the ranger had given them. They didn't trust electronic devices this time. preferring paper and the clear directions of someone who knew the area. Dusk was settling in, and lights shone ahead like beacons, the first signs of human presence in 3 long days. Highway 190 greeted them with smooth asphalt that seemed like a luxury after the potholes and rocky off-ramps. Donna turned the wheel toward Furness Creek, the park's tourist center, where help was already waiting for them. By the time they arrived at Furness Creek, news of the miraculous rescue of the 3 women had already spread. Medics were waiting for them, ready to provide assistance. Despite 3 days in extreme conditions, the physical condition of all 3 was better than could have been expected. Donna, Gina, and Jenny were suffering from dehydration and exhaustion, but thanks to the water and canned food found in the abandoned camp and their own resourcefulness, more serious consequences were avoided. At the medical station, they were greeted with cautious surprise. It's not every day that people survive after so many days in July's Death Valley. Donna was immediately put on a saline drip, and Gina and Jenny were given special electrolyte drinks. The doctors examined each of them carefully, paying particular attention to signs of heat stroke or sunburn. By this time, the phones were already ringing off the hook. Skye Cooper was in tears talking to her mother, thanking heaven for saving them. Charlene Dean was preparing the house in Pahrump for Donna's return. Jenny's parents in Hong Kong, awakened in the middle of the night by a call with news of their daughter's rescue, couldn't believe she had survived such an ordeal. After medical examinations and procedures, the women were allowed to rest at the Furness Creek Motel. A clean bed, air-conditioned air, and cool tap water, simple comforts that now seemed like incredible luxuries. They slept long and deep, without nightmares or worries, knowing that the worst was over. The next day, the Rangers arranged transportation to Pahrump. Before leaving, the Ranger Station Chief invited the women in for a brief conversation. He was interested in the details of their journey, especially the decision to follow the GPS directions through Tea Kettle Junction. The information they provided was invaluable in preventing similar incidents in the future. But most important were the quiet moments when Donna, Gina, and Jenny were finally in the safety of home, realizing how close they had come to the line beyond which there was no return, and how much the ordeal had brought them together. The events in Death Valley left a mark on each of the women's lives. The physical effects, dry skin, fatigue, and slight dehydration, quickly passed, but the psychological impact was more profound. "I didn't doubt for a second that we were going to make it out," Donna said in an interview on the 20 by 20s program a few months later. Her confidence and calm during the crisis helped the group survive, confirming life experience as an invaluable resource. For Gina, the ordeal was a turning point. Inspired by the work of the paramedics who saved them, she enrolled in nursing school, determined to dedicate her life to helping others in critical situations. Jenny returned to Hong Kong, but the experience created an unbreakable bond with the Cooper family. Less than a year later, she came to America again, already as a university student, living in their home. The survival experience taught her not to be afraid of hardship in a foreign country. In 2011, ABC organized a reunion between the women and their rescuers to film a segment of 20 by 20. When the helicopter landed and pilots Tyler Jones and Scott Steele got out, Donna was the first to cross the space separating them. Hugs, tears of gratitude, unspoken words. The moment was filled with genuine emotion. The story of the 3 women became a textbook example for the Death Valley Rangers. They coined the term death by GPS and reinforced the warnings, always take paper maps. GPS can guide you on impassable roads. A week without GPS is always better than a day without water. The updated brochures now included the requirement of a full tank of fuel and a gallon of water per person for the day. The case reminded the world that even in the age of technology, nature requires respect and preparation, but it also showed the strength of the human spirit, resourcefulness, and the importance of remaining calm in the face of danger. The 3 women entered Death Valley as ordinary travelers and came out with a story of survival that is part of the legacy of this harsh but beautiful place. The story of Donna, Gina, and Jenny makes you wonder about the fine line between adventure and disaster. What if they hadn't found an abandoned campground with water? What if the helicopter had turned around a few minutes earlier? This story ended with a rescue, but the desert is dotted with the unmarked graves of those less fortunate. Perhaps the most important lesson of this story is that even in the age of smartphones and satellite navigation, our survival still depends on basic skills and common sense. We become so dependent on technology that we forget about everything else. Are you prepared for a situation where technology lets you down? If you like this survival story, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. In the comments, tell us about your most extreme wilderness experience or how you prepare for traveling to remote places. Each week we break down new survival stories so you can learn from other people's mistakes, not your own. Thanks for watching, and see you in future episodes.